Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sam. I hope you're doing really well. And on this channel, I like to talk about all things Blu-ray, films, and physical media collecting in general. And today's video is actually a response video to my friend Rob over at the Movie Vault, who posted a video recently listing his favorite films from each year since the year he was born. So let's just get stuck into it. My favorite film from 1988 is Katsuhiro Otomo's Akira. So this is, in my opinion, the epitome of animation, hand-drawn animation particularly. And yeah, it's a very, very influential film, particularly on the sci-fi genre. And in my opinion, it is peerless. My pick from 1989 is the Palme d'Or winning film from Steven Soderbergh, Sex, Lies and Videotape. So this is a film about the modern sort of complexities of relationships and intimacy sort of issues as sort of like technology and stuff is becoming more prominent in people's lives. And yeah, it's a really, really good film. My favorite film from 1990 is an Iranian film by Abbas Kiarostami, and that is Close Up. So this is a really interesting mix of documentary and sort of fictional storytelling. However, the fictional is based on a true event, and the actors who are portraying this event were the people that were actually involved in the actual event in real life. Yeah, it's a mind bender, but it is a truly beautiful film, and yeah, it definitely tugs at the heartstrings. 1991, one of my favorite action films ever, and a childhood favorite of mine, and that is Terminator 2: Judgment Day, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. This actual disc, this 4K disc, is actually pretty poor, but the film itself is legendary, and yeah, it's endlessly watchable, and I love it so much. My favorite film from 1992 was actually panned by sort of critics and audiences really upon its release, but in recent years has garnered a reappraisal of sorts, and I for one think it's a masterpiece. I'm talking about David Lynch's Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me. So your appreciation of this film does rely somewhat on your enjoyment of the Twin Peaks sort of TV series and the universe in general. But yeah, for me, it's one of Lynch's best films. Next up, for 1993, is probably the best hangout movie of all time. It's one of Quentin Tarantino's very favorite films, and I'm talking about Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused. So this film is set on the last day of school in America in like the 70s, and it just follows the lives of several different students throughout an afternoon and an evening as they sort of get high and drink and drive around their town just looking for something to do really. And it's just a really good snapshot of in time and very nostalgic for the period. Next up, from 1994, is another Palme d'Or winning film, and it's one of the first films that really got me interested in the filmmaking process as more than just a means of entertainment. And I'm talking about Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. So there's a bit of discourse really about how sort of good Tarantino's body of work is. But I truly think that this is his magnum opus and is just a culmination of everything that Tarantino's really, really good at, all put into one film. It's great soundtrack, incredible performances, extremely quotable dialogue, and yeah, it's my pick for 1994. Next up, from 1995, is a Martin Scorsese picture, and I'm talking about Casino. Hot take, I think that this is better than Goodfellas, only by a little bit, but if you was to ask me to choose between this and Goodfellas, I would say Casino is the better film. It's the one I've watched the most and the one that I'm drawn to and just generally entertained by more. And so yeah, I really, really rate Casino. It's my favourite film of 95. 1996 is a film directed by the legendary Wes Craven. I'm talking about Scream. So Scream is a film that sort of transcends the horror genre. I'm a huge horror fan. Not a lot of my very favourite films are horror, but I tend to approach a lot of horror films in general as sort of like comfort films or something like that. I find them very cartoony or generally not scary at all. But Scream is a very different type of film in that genre. It's very meta, self-referential, and very sort of like self-aware, and it's just endlessly entertaining, and I love it so much. My favorite film from 1997 is another David Lynch film. There's a theme here with David Lynch films, and it's his film Lost Highway, starring Bill Pullman and Patricia Arquette. So this film is an enigma. It's very difficult to describe what happens in this film, but there's something about the tone and the mood and the atmosphere that just keeps me coming back to this film to try and pick apart its mysteries, even though I don't think there's an answer to it. I'm a very big fan of ambiguity, like films that leave you thinking long afterwards to try and understand what you've watched. And that's definitely one of those type of films in Lost Highway. My favorite film from 1998 is probably my favorite comedy film of all time, and it's in fact a film I didn't actually like that much the first time I saw it, and it's only on subsequent viewings that it's become one of my very favorite films, and I'm talking about the Coen Brothers' The Big Lebowski. Now, in my opinion, this film has the best script, sort of screenplay of all time. I think the dialogue is damn near perfect. The performances by everyone, every cast member is just spot on. And yeah, it's got a very much a cult following around it. And it just gets better every time I watch it. It's one of those really like pure examples of repeated viewings just making me appreciate it so much more every time I view it, and it's definitely in my top 10 films of all time. Next up in 1999 was a film that had a lot of buzz before it was released. It's, I think, on record as being one of the longest continuous shoots for a film ever. And it was the last film from this director as well before he died. I'm talking about Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. So just this one here. I don't have a single release of this, but it's in this box set, and it stars the real life at the time couple Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman as they're sort of navigating the pitfalls of a breakdown in communication in their marriage, and how each of them may or may not be sort of flirting with the idea of infidelity. And it's also set at Christmas time, although it's not a Christmas movie, but it's also a sort of a dark alternative sort of holiday film during the holiday season. My favorite film from the year 2000, kicking off the new millennium, is actually a film I only watched very recently, and I was so impressed with it that I knew after I finished watching it that it would sort of go into the ranks of being one of my very favorite films ever. I'm talking about Edward Yang's Yi or Yi. I'm never sure how to pronounce this one. But this is just a beautiful family saga, really, set in Taiwan, and it follows like several months in the year of this family, all the way from like the children up to like grandparents and extended family members, and just what they're getting up to. And it's just, yeah, a beautiful film. It starts with a wedding ceremony and ends with a funeral. That's not a spoiler, by the way. And yeah, it's just a gorgeous piece of cinema, and I can feel that this is going to get better every time I watch it. The big one, 2001. My favorite film came out in this year, and if you know me, you probably know what this film is. I'm talking about David Lynch's, again, David Lynch, there's a common theme here, his film Mulholland Drive. Now, this film has everything in it that I want from a film viewing experience. It has amazing cinematography, amazing performances, has amazing music, it has a very ambiguous and enigmatic storyline where you're not quite sure what's reality and what's dream and what's happening in general. And yeah, repeated viewings definitely helps to try and cement your thoughts about what's happening in this film, because it's very, very confusing at times. But I adore this film, and it's definitely my favorite film of all time so far in my life. So David Lynch's Mulholland Drive. Next up, for 2002, is a film that I feel isn't talked about enough, really. It came out not long after 9/11, and stars Edward Norton and Philip Seymour Hoffman, and it's 25th Hour. So this film follows a group of friends who are having sort of one last night of like a celebration or just freedom until one of them is going to jail for several years for a crime he's committed. And it's a really interesting, I don't like to use the word character study, but it sort of is a look at these three men in general, and how this event is going to affect them. And yeah, it's just a really great film that sorely needs a restoration and a Blu-ray sort of release, at least in the UK or Europe. I don't think there is one, at least not to my knowledge. It'd be really perfect for the Criterion Collection, I think, as well. Next up, from 2003, is a film that's long been one of my favorite films that I've watched so many times I've lost count, and it's directed by Sofia Coppola, and it's Lost in Translation. So this film is, as the title suggests, about a breakdown in communication and feeling lost and not knowing what to do with your life, and questioning your relationships and things like that, all set with two Americans sort of spending some time in Japan and not really understanding the language there. And it's very funny, very heartfelt film. It's also got a really understated soundtrack as well that I think is stellar. And yeah, this is one that I revisit on a regular basis, and I absolutely love it. Next up, from 2004, is a film that's actually part of a trilogy, and this is my favorite film from that trilogy. And it's another film from Richard Linklater, and it's his film Before Sunset. So the Before trilogy is a set of films that is like a snapshot in time of this couple, filmed several years apart from each other. And my favorite is the one in the middle. It's set in Paris, and the film is very much just a conversation, a very extended conversation of two people walking through the streets of Paris, talking to each other, discussing life and philosophical things. And it's just utterly engaging and really, really entertaining film that I've revisited several times. And yeah, I think you get more out of this the older you get, I feel. And I really, really love this one. Next up, from 2005, is a film by Noah Baumbach, and it's his film The Squid and the Whale, starring Jeff Daniels. So this film is a really interesting dissection of a divorce and how this affects the children of this married couple, and also just follows them as they're sort of navigating this like difficult time in their lives. It's very funny, the dialogue is very good, and it's also very personal as well from Noah Baumbach. He's tackled this theme in another film of his, Marriage Story. I do think that this is a superior film. While I do think the performances in Marriage Story are a lot more notable and more powerful, I do think the writing and the dialogue in this film is superior. And yeah, it's definitely my favourite film of 2005. 2006, getting through these slowly but surely, is another Martin Scorsese film, but I'm talking about his sort of gangster film. He's revisited gangster films a lot in his career, and it's The Departed, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Jack Nicholson, Mark Wahlberg. The performances in this film are incredible. There is a great soundtrack. Again, Scorsese generally has good soundtracks in his films, and it's, in my opinion, maybe just that little bit lower than Taxi Driver. I think Taxi Driver is still Scorsese's crowning achievement, but this is a close second for me. And yeah, definitely my favourite film of 2006. 2007, I had to get one film in here by this director. I'm really, like, over time becoming to appreciate this director more and more. Talking about Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood, starring an incredible performance by Daniel Day-Lewis, who plays sort of like an oil tycoon type character and just sort of follows his relationships with the people around him. And yeah, it's just beautifully shot, and yeah, one of PTA's best films. Now, my pick from 2008 is not a film I would recommend, mainly because of the extreme content that's in it. It's a very violent film by French director Pascal Laugier, and it's his film Martyrs. Now, if you've seen this film, then you know that it is probably one of the most violent films you'll ever see. But I do believe that beneath the horrific things that are shown on screen in this film, that there is a deep sort of, without sounding too corny, I do believe there's like some profound philosophical things to ponder about the goings on in this film, if you can just about manage to see past the brutality that's in it. It's extremely well shot, and the acting is absolutely incredible, regardless of whether you like this film or not. I don't think you can disagree with how well the film is put together, but I do believe the content does put a lot of people off with this one. I won't describe what it's about, but if you're interested, look up the synopsis and see whether it takes your fancy. But yeah, this is one that's stuck with me ever since I've seen it, and I do believe it's a masterpiece, and yeah, it's my favourite film from 2008. So the next film from 2009, why slightly more palatable than Martyrs, is still got some shocking content in it. And I'm talking about Yorgos Lanthimos' Dogtooth. This is definitely my favourite film from Lanthimos. It's extremely subversive and shocking, but also beautifully shot and acted and staged. And to briefly summarise what this film is about, it follows the life of this family, a married couple and their two daughters and son, who live in this house, but the children have never gone outside of their property. So they live in the house and they go out into the garden, but they've never been into the outside world. And it's about how this couple have brought their children up, and also playing with the idea of what reality and things are, by like teaching them what different sounds aren't what they are, as opposed to what society thinks they are. It's confusing to try and describe this, but it's an incredibly interesting film. And yeah, the actual suspense as well in places during the film is really good. And yeah, it's Lanthimos' best film in my opinion. So my favourite film from 2010 is actually my favourite film from the last decade. So if you saw one of my first videos that I made on YouTube quite a few months back, you will probably know what this is, but it's David Fincher's The Social Network. So this film follows the sort of birth of Facebook and all the proceedings that went around that, including Mark Zuckerberg and Sean Parker. It has one of my favourite scores. I'd say it's my favourite film score of all time by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. Just really adds to the bubbling dread and betrayal that comes about in this film. I think this in years to come will be looked at as being one of the shining achievements of the earliest part of this century, and I wholeheartedly love it, and I've watched it so many times I can't count. Next up from 2011 is a Palme d'Or winning film again, and it's my favourite film from this director, and it's one of the best looking films of all time, and it's Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life. To describe this film is very difficult, but it's about everything really. It's about the beginning of the universe and civilization coming about, and it's about faith and it's about family, and it's, yeah, one of the most beautifully photographed films I've ever seen. And yeah, it's truly incredible, and I absolutely love it. My favorite film from 2012 is another Noah Baumbach film that he wrote with Greta Gerwig of Lady Bird and Little Women fame, and it's Frances Ha. So this is really interesting. It's filmed in black and white, and it's very much a love letter to New York City and to young people following their dreams, even when they like become lost or sort of second guess their decisions in life. And it's just really, really good, and I don't know what else to say about it. It's just an incredible film. 2013, another Martin Scorsese film. I think Martin Scorsese, along with David Lynch, caps off the most number of films per director in my top list that I'm making here. And I'm talking about The Wolf of Wall Street, again starring Leonardo DiCaprio in an incredible turn, and it chronicles the life of this man working on Wall Street and basically scamming people and becoming super rich, and his downfall. And it's very funny, it's very satirical, and a lot of people sort of compare it as the Wall Street version of Goodfellas, the rise and fall of an individual. And yeah, it's very quotable. There's a lot of memes from this film that are on the internet, and I really, really love it. I just said about Martin Scorsese and David Lynch, but I forgot about this next pick, which also equals 3 from this director. I'm talking about 2014's Boyhood, directed by Linklater. So that also makes 3 films by that director as well. This film is a experimental film, really, that doesn't feel too experimental when you're watching it, but it was filmed consecutively over a period of like 10 or 12 years. I can't remember, but it details the life of a young boy at sort of like early school years up until he goes to college, and the same actors and actresses and stuff are used throughout the entirety of this filming. So a bit was filmed each year, so the actor grows up on screen in front of you. And like E.E., it's very much like a family saga type film, and if those types of films are really done right, then I'm sort of fall for those films quite easily. But I think this is a masterpiece, and Linklater's best film, and it's amazing. So 2015 marked the year that, in my opinion, the greatest action film ever was produced. By the crazy George Miller. I'm talking about Mad Max Fury Road. I love everything about this film, from its set design to its cinematography to the stunts and choreography. There's so much interpretation that could be had in this film about potentially the dangers of the world that we're living in and how we abuse it, and how prophetic this film may be in the future. There are also undercurrents of like feminism, and it's just a glorious, chaotic masterpiece of carnage, and it's something I watch quite regularly, and I absolutely adore it. So this next film from 2016 is by Park Chan-wook, probably most famous for directing Old Boy and the Vengeance trilogy. But his film The Handmaiden from 2016 is an incredible film, and probably my favourite from this director. It's like a psychosexual thriller set in like pre-war Japan, as Japan were occupying Korea, and it's just a really well constructed sort of thriller mystery of lots of twists and turns, and it's just gorgeous. Nearly there, guys, just a few more to go. My favourite film from 2017 is quite a controversial film, really. There are a lot of people at like the big festival screenings of this film walked out because they were quite horrified. by what they saw. I don't think the content in this film warrants that sort of response, although some of it is quite shocking. I still think it's quite a marvelous piece of art. But I'm talking about Darren Aronofsky's Mother, starring Jennifer Lawrence. So this film is an analogy for what I don't quite know. You could say it's an analogy of the birth of religion, or the birth of the earth, or something. There's a lot of interpretation that can be had about this, but essentially this film is like a home invasion that cascades into something very unexpected if you don't know what you're going into before you watch this. But yeah, this film left me like researching all the symbolism that is shown in the film afterwards, and I think this is one of Jennifer Lawrence's very best performances, and it's just expertly directed as well by Aronofsky. I think he's a really good filmmaker. 2018 marked the year that one of my very favourite horror films of all time came out. This is the debut feature from American filmmaker Ari Aster and his film Hereditary. I typically don't get scared by films these days. I used to when I was a kid or a teenager growing up, but I come very desensitized to a film that is trying to scare you in a traditional sense. This is the first time in years that a film has got under my skin and truly sort of shocked me in that respect. It's very much why that works, and then why it scares me is because at the core of this film, it's like a family tragedy about dealing with a horrific event that happens to them, and then various supernatural or demonic influences then come part of the story. I think Toni Collette in this film gives one of the greatest performances ever. I think she was criminally overlooked by any of the awarding sort of bodies in and around Hollywood, or internationally for that matter. And Ari Aster is sort of one to watch out for, in my opinion. One of the best modern filmmakers, along with Midsommar, which is sort of like a very close follow-up to what my favourite film from 2019 is, but Hereditary is definitely my favourite film from 2018. 2019 is a very difficult year to pick my favourite film. My mind keeps changing on what that is. Midsommar, as I mentioned with Hereditary, is one of my favourite films from that year. Additionally, Little Women by Greta Gerwig was also an incredible standout film from that year. And this film, after a second viewing of this, is just slotted into my #1 spot from that year, just about. I'm talking about Celine Sciamma's A Portrait of a Lady on Fire. So along with The Tree of Life, I think that this is one of the most beautiful films of the last decade, and definitely of all time. It's very painterly, and it just tells a beautiful story about a woman who's been tasked with painting the portrait of another woman for the purpose of trying to marry her off to someone that she's never met. And it's about how these two women sort of like develop a relationship together, and it's just utterly incredible and absorbing, and yeah, my favourite film of 2019. So I haven't got a favourite film of 2020 because 2020 has been quite dry in my opinion for film. One, because we've been going through a pandemic, so going to the theatre or cinema to see films has like been non-existent for the longest time. And yeah, I've just not really been watching any new releases as of late, apart from a couple of things. So I think I'll make my 2020 pick after I've actually viewed some more things from the year. But I will say that the best thing I've watched in 2020 is the documentary from ESPN Films that was also sort of aired on Netflix. That is The Last Dance, which is the documentary about the dynasty of the Chicago Bulls, following Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman and all the various different characters and players and stuff from that period of time. And yeah, it's definitely one of the best things I saw this year in terms of entertainment. So I'd say preliminary, that'll be my pick, even though it's not a film, it's like a TV documentary. In terms of like entertainment and filmic type things, that's definitely the best thing I saw in 2020. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about my list, whether you agree with it, whether your list is different and where it's different. And yeah, I'll be really interested to see what your thoughts are. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to give it a like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to make you aware when I post a new video. And until next time, everyone, take care.